Good morning, and welcome to the TV of Tomorrow panel on good wayfinding, programming discovery and recommendations. My name is Gerard Kunkel. As you may know, I am a longtime believer in the value of quality television wayfinding experiences, the importance in driving viewership and ultimately driving the ability to monetize television. I'm currently an executive advisor at Microsoft, formerly with Comcast, Guideworks, WorldGate, TV Gateway, FutureVision, a whole bunch of ITV startups and initiatives over the past, I'm ashamed to say in certain regards, 20 some odd years. Mike, I see you laughing out there. Today I'm hosting a great group of thought leaders in the general technology of companies offering solutions that will drive highly effective wayfinding through metadata and analysis. So, let me tell you a little bit about these individuals. Yossi Glick, and I don't know if you're in the same order as my presentation, so if you'll please raise your hands as I mention you, thank you. Yossi Glick is the co-founder and CEO of Ginny. He recently published his first book, Super Search Me, and I'm sure he'll be happy to give you a business card with the URL to go purchase that book after the event.
He needs revenue.
He's looking for revenue for his business and for himself, obviously. Ginny is the first and only mood-based and taste-based content discovery engine using natural language processing to power a truly user-centric next-gen guide that breaks away from the grid. I'm sure we'll be talking about that. John Zelenka. So far, we're in order. This is amazing. Thank you, gentlemen. John Zelenka is the Executive Vice President of Revenue at Digital Smiths. John has more than 15 years of experience in media, including nearly a decade in content discovery technologies and services. Digital Smiths provides the industry's most comprehensive platform for personalized video search and recommendations by leveraging a deeper level of intelligence around video content and the preferences of individual consumers. Digital Smiths can deliver unparalleled video discovery personalization. Richard Dowling. Okay, out of order, thank you very much. Richard is VP of Product Services for Think Analytics. Richard is a 12-year veteran at Think Analytics, and Richard has been working with service providers around the world, personalizing the viewer experience with the use of recommendations. Think Analytics is the world's most widely deployed TV recommendation engine with over 20 service provider customers. Their predictive viewing intelligence has been executing discovery and delivering personalized recommendations to multiple platforms, leveraging live TV, VOD, over-the-top, and social content. Alex Vicati. Alex is Executive Director, Product Strategy and Innovation at Tribune Media Services. In her role, she focuses on multi-platform video search and discovery technologies, data, and related services. She spearheaded the creation of TMS's online video data product. Alex was co-founder and president of Cast TV, a pioneer in online video search acquired by TMS in 2010. Tribune Media Services provides TV, movie, and celebrity metadata that fuels the guide products of top media and technology companies and enables advanced entertainment search and discovery worldwide. Owen Dowling, not to be confused with his brother Richard sitting right next to him. Yeah. Owen is Chief Executive Officer of Boxfish. Boxfish is an interesting new company that captures every word spoken on television in real time, offering users a rich layer of discovery that is changing the way we control, discover, and consume TV. And in a quick conversation with Owen before this session, I'm sure Owen shared with me what he will share with you in this panel about some partnerships and interesting applications of his technology. Sefi Arieli. Excellent, thank you, Sefi. Is newly appointed EVP of Americas for Viaxis Orca, which you will probably tell the audience about what Viaxis Orca is after the Orca Interactive business change. Sefi has accumulated his experience in content discovery through spending the last 14 years speaking with and listening to IPTV and pay TV operators around the world. Over the last 6 years, a big part of that time has been devoted to the Compass discovery system and content discovery solution and the practical implications of rolling it out. Vyaxis Orca is a game-changing partner for content service providers thanks to its ability to protect and enhance the value of content services wherever viewers are and on whichever device they choose to consume content. The company assists operators in creating long-term loyalty on the customer journey to discover, choose, and consume content in a secure manner. Vyaxis Orca is a France Telecom Group company. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for participating this morning. And this is a wayfinding. Yes, thank you very much. Questions? Wayfinding is the topic here. And according to the dictionary, wayfinding is signs, maps, and other graphic and audible methods used to convey location and directions to travelers. This term was first coined in 1960 by architect Kevin Lynch. While the definition was coined to describe devices used to help travelers find their way, the term is equally relevant as we all develop products to help lead users to great content consumption. As a setup for our conversation this morning with this group of panelists, I'll summarize the state of TV wayfinding today. TV viewers have continually sought easier solutions for finding and consuming the content that they love. With an overabundance of TV programming choice offered by today's pay TV providers, consumers must struggle through guidance and navigation systems and myriad linear and on-demand video choices to get the content that they seek. Therefore, panelists, let's have a chat this morning about how the analysis of metadata and the many forms in which you operate will lead to higher quality recommendations and discovery. So we have a prepared set of questions. I will post one question to one of you. Feel free, the rest of you panelists, to share the microphone and chime in, and I'll mix it up a bit, and then hopefully we'll leave some time for the audience to participate as well. So, first question. Consumers have shown time and again that they seek simplicity. What role does wayfinding, programming discovery, recommendations play in simplifying what is becoming an increasingly complex world? Alex, I see you looking at me right now, therefore you obviously have a well-constructed answer to this.
Well, I'm here to talk about data, right? That's what TMS does, and basically, for for any type of user interface, for any type of application that's going to connect users with great content, you need great data. And you need data about the program, and you need data about the availability. As you were mentioning, it's not just a linear world anymore. There's VOD, there's OTT, there's, you can watch your content across all kinds of different devices, but some content may be available on one device and not on another device. Folks want rich experiences. It's not just about text. You need beautiful images. You need information about cast and crew that connects content from one way to the other. One of the things that I feel gets there's a lot that happens between. I think we're going to all be in agreement that the traditional grid is going away. It's clearly not where anybody wants to start.
But it is a behavior that consumers have well ingrained in their lifestyles. Would you not agree?
The going to the grid?
Yes.
Sure, but I think that the grid, as presented with hundreds of choices, that part will go away. I think there's still very much an element of appointment viewing, and appointment viewing for content that matters, whether it's sports or American Idol or the finale of Game of Thrones. But scrolling through the grid, sorting through the grid, I think that that consumers are pretty willing to let go of that.
Would you agree it's maybe not the preferred way to get content, but it may be the habit that needs to be broken?
Well, I mean, it seems like folks are breaking that habit because there is a lot of uptake of online video viewing where it's not grid-based, right? We've all seen the stats about the growth of viewing OTT or online video content. There is adoption of these these second screen apps, which are allowing for much better way to interact with your application. So I think that there's a lot of signals that consumers can pretty easily move away from the grid.
Okay. Looks like you're asking a question. So we have a difficulty here with only 3 microphones and 6 panelists, so fight for that microphone, if you will, please.
Yeah, I didn't know if you wanted to take it in this direction on the grid yet, but
go ahead.
I can respond to that. I think there's an important distinction here too between the difference between the fact that content is broadcast in time and channel versus being presented in time and channel. Right. I think that's a fundamental difference. And if you present the very same linear content in a way that reflects what the predicted likability or the preferences of the individual user are, it's amazing how many actual opportunities to discover content are out there, even in a linear schedule. It's just the fact that it's presented today in a very tunnel vision sort of way, and you're only focused on the 8 channels that you're looking at. So there's a tremendous amount of content just in a linear schedule that the average consumer isn't finding.
Very good, thank you. So, Yossi, go ahead.
Yeah, today actually one of our customers announced that they are launching our taste model into the set-top box. And I think that probably will be the very first deployment of a grid breaker. Now, in case you ask yourself, what does it mean, taste model? Now, I would ask you, all of you here, we are consuming TV for the last 10 or 15 years. If you have to ask yourself, who am I in terms of my entertainment personality? What is it that I like? You probably don't have the lingo. You cannot define it. You are not sure if you are a crumbling marriage, witty, suburban life person or psychopath, intense person. You are not sure. But what we actually do, we take your consumption and we try to figure out which attributes in your personality or where you go into escapism when you actually want to be engaged, which of those shine, and we cluster it in a way that we determine your taste. And actually, we won the Innovation Award from Cable Labs for this idea. And once we calculate your various tastes, each taste becomes like a filter that cuts through the guide, EPG, VOD, over the top, which means we create a user-centric guide, something that builds for you, no longer one-size-fits-all. So I think the grid will stay. But side by side to the grid, you have to introduce something that built for you and reflection of your personality. I think that's the evolution that, and everything is done with the natural language, and I'm giving a demo after this session in the follow-up session about natural language navigation. So you're welcome to see that demo.
Richard, you're chomping at the bit to say something.
Certainly am. Thank you very much. Really, what I wanted to say, if you sort of think of the traditional guide, which is kind of where we started for this part of the discussion from, if you were to look at it on a standard TV and have it sort of piled up one on top of the other, one on top of the other, it's about 300 feet if you've got a 500-channel lineup. So it's about 300 feet to look from top to bottom. So if you had that on a piece of paper, there's no way you'd actually view that. So people, not surprisingly, view the 8 channels up at the top. So as Gerard mentioned in the introduction, at Think Analytics, we're working with over 20 operators. That's about 80 million subscribers worldwide, providing content recommendations. It's something that's got stuff to announce soon in the US and North American markets, but it's been something that's been taken up very quickly in Europe and other parts of the world as well. And it's all about, if you like, refining that guide and the on-demand content and everything else, and bringing that to the customer so that it's right there. You don't have to do a sort of engaged lean forwards experience where you're going through a guide, choosing something that you like. It's saying, hey, I know quite a lot about you because I've been watching what you do in terms of what you're viewing. I know what you like, I know what you dislike. And from that, why don't you watch these shows? And that's something as I say, we've been doing for 7 years at Think Analytics. So it's certainly not our first deployment into a set-top box or anywhere like that. It's something we've been doing for a very long time.
One thing I'd like to mention is that in discussions about recommendations, it seems like we go from the grid to personalized recommendations for one, and it gets even more specific for the male head of household or something like that. That's where people want to get. But there's so much in between, and I think that we owe it to ourselves. And the reality is a lot of that is going to come before we get to that super personalized recommendation. And we can look at data around what's happening in kind of in social media. We can see what things are trending. We can look at simple things like geography. I mean, there are a whole lot of people who weren't hockey fans in LA, a couple months ago, and who jumped on that bandwagon and had a really fun time watching that series. So there's also just a lot of simple signals or more simple signals that we can look at to develop meaningful guidance for users.
Alex, that's a perfect setup for a question for Owen, because Owen's not about the grid. Owen is not about just a recommendation posted to an individual. Owen, tell us a little bit about how you would approach this issue with social media.
Well, I think before even answering that, I think there's two problems that need to be solved, and there's all of us want to kick the grid, down, and it doesn't work. But then there's the point you made about, look, people have been doing this for years, and we have to break that down. I heard a stat yesterday where 60% of people's programming choices are predetermined. So they know when they get to the TV what they're going to watch. So the grid then just becomes a navigation tool to get to that channel. But there's that 40% of, we don't know what to watch and what's on. And that's a huge opportunity for everyone to take that opening and start to chip away at the grid. But I don't think we'll be seeing the death of the grid anytime soon, but I think we'll start to see an awful lot on top of it. But what we do in terms of that discovery is we take every word spoken, and people tell us what they're interested in. And we thought when we had every word spoken that it's a perfect opportunity for search. And we put a search bar up in front of all the data, and we process all the information in real time. But we found that search, it was just a component of the discovery, and we thought what we saw was a subsection of users actually bookmarking search results. And we thought this is a perfect news tool, so we had all politics and news and an awful lot of kind of product built around that. But the top searches were Kim Kardashian, Justin Bieber, Lady Gaga, Katy Perry. You can't avoid it. But we found that these people were bookmarking the results page to find out what the latest TV was saying about the people that they were interested in. So what we did was we created a kind of a Twitter feed of live TV around what people are interested in, and they're using this as a discovery mechanism to actually find new television.
And by the way, everyone's website is being posted up here on the presentation along with their names and titles, so you can go to LinkedIn to get their bios, you can go to their website to get more product information. And at this time, let me pass the question over to Ariely, which is this. Today's video consumption is a cornucopia of content breadth, depth, quality, and conditional access. Content can be free with subscription, rented, purchased, can be standard def, high def, delivered over a managed network, delivered OTT, lots of options. How do you help a consumer find their way through all of this and get the content they want, probably at the price or the subscription that they want?
Well, your timing is impeccable, because that allows me to both address the sort of grid discussions that's been going on. The grid is a legacy from TV Guide, which was a print magazine. So if you take that sort of input medium and compare it to what we have today, there are a few subtle differences. And as we go into more and more devices and more input mechanisms, whether it's natural, whether it's touch, the way people will interact with any information that we present to them is going to differ. Therefore, the discussion on grid or not grid is to me, it's a side effect. Some people will stick to the grid and will need to craft the information that way, and some people will have devices that put the grid finally to rest. What is important is that the more people are engaging with the vast variety of content that the operators are putting out for them, if it's linear, if it's nonlinear, if it's was linear and now is catch-up, these things need to be consistent across all the devices that have been presented to them. So a lot of the topics that have been going on is second screen, third screen, multi-screen, streaming over the top. All these, if you look at where TV is and where it's going, it's no longer related in any distinction to one type of device. Now, the rights aren't there yet. And therefore, it is very difficult, and I had a very unsatisfactory experience with Netflix when I tried to order something that was recommended to me by Netflix, and then I discovered that was not available to me because I didn't have the device, the subscription, or whatever. So that is a key element in the experience. Each content that we want to offer has to be mapped to the devices that can take it, both from a technical and rights perspective. It has to be mapped there, strung along down to the content protection mechanism that will be linked to that device. Because at the end of the day, the tolerance for people to receive semi-accurate recommendations is very, very thin. And when you look at what recommendations are, they're basically a matter of trust. And when an operator is recommending something, the only way they can expect a subscriber to accept that recommendation is if they've established trust. Trust is established when, A, I believe that you have my best interest at heart, B, when I believe that you know what you're saying, and C, when I believe that you don't have any motive to mislead me. If the system, if the recommendations themselves don't create that level of trust, then it doesn't matter how we present the recommendations. People will use them only when they don't have a choice, and it will be nothing different than clicking down or up on the grid.
So Arielle, I agree that if a consumer is faced with a dead end in their navigation, meaning they either hit something that was unexpected, or it literally is a dead end, they cannot get the content that has been recommended to them, that's an absolute fail. And in many cases, you may lose that subscriber or you may lose that audience at that moment. So panelists across the board, John, maybe starting with you, how do you work to get them the right recommendation, but also making sure they can actually act on that recommendation in a very successful way?
Right. I'd like to take a little bit of a step back here just from recommendations, more to wayfinding and content discovery in general, I think, as a topic. And what our goal really is very simple. And what we need to do is remove a lot of the complexity from this discussion from our customers and from the consumers. And we need to make that whole process simpler. So all of us up here, some of us do it in different ways, but we're doing a lot of very complex tasks behind the scenes to drive content discovery. We're doing metadata curation, we're doing search, we're doing recommendations. In some cases, we're integrating those. We have business rules engines. We're surfacing a lot of these, through pretty sophisticated sets of APIs for customers to use. We have to get into the architectures of each one of our individual customers. But I would say that our goal is really to take all of that and make it as simple for our customers as we can, with one goal being to deliver the most personalized, relevant content to the individual. And I think the way that we do that is we have information about users and we have information about the content. And so, Gerard, to your question about, how do we draw on that information, if we don't have good information about the users, if we don't develop good user profiles and personalization, if we don't have good metadata, and we can't draw smart technologies to draw the connection between those two things, that's what drives content discovery. So we need the fundamental components, we need the baseline, we need user information, we need metadata, and we have to have really smart technologies that draw those connections. And that, day in and day out as a company, I know is what we're focused on. And whenever it gets really complex, we just try to kind of pull back and say, what are we really trying to do here? And we're trying to drive, individual consumption and personalization of content.
Alex?
So I agree with a lot of what John said. What I'll add to that is that, to your second question earlier, how do you make sure that the data is reliable so that the user doesn't face a dead end? Well, actually, for a number of my co-panelists here, they license data from TMS.
So you better be right.
Yeah. This is what we do. This is the complex, the piece of the puzzle that we work on. Because you're absolutely right. The explosion of data, devices, different types of availability has created a number of new categories of availability data that we need to keep on top of, that we need to maintain, that needs to be fresh. When Game of Thrones airs on television and is available simultaneously on HBO Go, a user wants to know that, or end consumer wants to know that right away. And so, we're the folks that bring that data to the industry.
Are any of you tying into the back office systems of the MVPDs to deliver upsell opportunities? You mentioned Game of Thrones. So if Yossi's system recommends to me that I should be watching Game of Thrones, how do you take me all the way through to an HBO subscription? Is that part of the integration, John, that you're talking about with your partners?
Yeah, so the way that we're currently doing that now is we have a pretty sophisticated set of business rules where you can boost certain results for search and for recommendations. And so we can feature basically whatever economic value or a proposition that a customer wants to provide. One of the things that we're not doing, to be transparent, and this probably goes to the privacy issue a little bit, is we are not tied directly into the subscriber systems at the customer. So a lot of what we're getting back is user identification information. We're getting device information that is anonymized and it's typically abstracted. So a lot of that personal data does live behind the customer's wall still.
Okay.
Can I add something about data? I think pointing to the right content is indeed one data, and we are customers of Alex, and I like the product and we use it a lot. But there's another angles of data. For example, our approach to data is that we believe that we want to reflect the content the way it was created. For that task, we created a genome, which is 2,200 long, and on average, for each content, we generate between 30 to 60 semantic tags into categories such as plot, mood, structure, humor, and so on and so on. Which means it's almost like reverse engineering the intentions of the scriptwriter and the director. So that's one angle of the data, and we know that users can use it to search, to browse, and recommend. Another angle of the data connected to the social element. Now, we all have Facebook, probably most of us. We all have hundreds of those. We all add them for the wrong reason, and even if we add them for the right reason, we still don't know whether we can trust a particular recommendation. Like, if somebody will tell me you should watch Glee, now, can I trust that opinion or not? So from Ginny's point of view, not only that I want to know the buzz, I also want to get reliable indication for those who are so-called my soulmates, people that have similar taste. And that's also part of the quality of the data that we want to surface. So we just post on your screen 5 to 10 names that are so-called your neighbors, and that's an important element in terms of building trust between you and the machine.
So Yossi, you mentioned social media. Let me bring that up as a question. We all have that large group of people on Facebook, and do we really want to, you're on my Facebook, I believe, right? Do I really want to watch the shows that you want? Do I really care about your recommendations? Don't answer just yet. And I think of my wife's consumer habits, her consumption habits, which are wildly different than my television consumption habits. So in a household of 2 or more people all sharing a display device, if you're integrated with that display device and you're learning consumption habits, how do you differentiate between those users? She likes to watch what I call death and dismemberment. Those things you find on Discovery ID, where husbands are hacking up their wives and vice versa. I don't watch those shows. So how do I avoid getting recommendations for those kind of shows with your system or with all the others here?
Yeah, I think you're mentioning a pretty common complaint about Netflix, that the kids are overusing Netflix, then all the recommendation is around Dora and similar kind of... So the way to avoid it, at least from Ginny's point of view, is, like I mentioned earlier, the taste model, which means you have the animation kingdom stuff, which is for the kids, and then you'll have, for me, the kinky stuff, which is infidelity, suburban life, or maybe the other kind of stuff. So, and my wife will have the kissing and loving and hugging stuff. So, which means we are able to segment, so we don't mix between personalities, which means even at the set-top box level, we don't know who is holding the remote control, but still we're able to create multiple stripes or multiple tastes. So, for example, one of our customers, it allows the users to associate themselves with one or more of the tastes so they can know which they are. So that eliminates the problem of what used to be with the TiVo thinks that I'm gay. So you don't want really to mix taste across people, and definitely not within a person.
Ariel?
If I may, we have to really be careful about being too interventionist in how a person eventually decides which product or which to buy or which content to watch. So by defining which friends they can consult with or they can, or who are the ones who they should listen to, or deciding what breaking down who they are to define what they should watch. This, I think, is we're walking a dangerous line here, because at the end of the day, we are a service provider making recommendations. These recommendations should lay out options, and those options should not only be focused on what the consumer has seen in the past, but also what might interest them in the future. So,
go ahead.
So one of the benefits that an MPVD would acquire from such a system is to actually expand the range of content that a subscriber is interacting with, therefore increasing both the appreciation of that bundle or that abundance of content, and therefore preventing them from churning away and taking away those monthly dollars. So the ability to increase the customer satisfaction is done by presenting them with options. These have to be sophisticated options coming from a number of different secret sauces that each one of us has their own ingredients. But it's very dangerous to try and typecast people. You can offer them characters that they can relate to. You can make recommendations. This is what I think. This is what HBO has recommended for you. These are all great examples. They should be accurate, but they should not be definitively guiding them to a certain selection.
Richard, John, do we have some opposing views?
Well, not necessarily opposing views, but kind of in agreement, but perhaps the method is slightly different.
Okay.
With our customer base, with the Think Analytics engine, what we try not to force people to do is to identify themselves to the box. If they do that, that's great. That's absolutely fine, and you can deal with that. And it's certainly if people say, yeah, it's me sitting here with my wife and the kids, that's great if they do that. But that doesn't happen in my house. It doesn't happen in my friend's house. It doesn't happen in anybody's house that I know. So you have to be able to assume who is there, have to figure out who's in front of the screen, and then give personalized recommendations based on that. And the recommendations should start off being very, very user-focused, customer-centric, really narrowing down to the sorts of things that you like, and finding out pretty much what that is, based on your viewing, based on your preferences, based on whether you've given us feedback about particular shows or not. All of those good learn actions. There's a whole load of different ones there.
In the scenario you're laying out, are you doing some type of real-time analysis of the click stream to understand who might be in front of the TV?
Absolutely. So it's a real-time analysis of for example, the shows that's being watched, the people who are sitting there, all of those sorts of things. So you're trying to figure out what happens normally at that time of day, that day of the week, and all of those sorts of things. So really having multiple profiles per household, per device. But the point I wanted to make with that is once you've learnt all of these things, is if you need to also have a very smart business rules engine that is able to say, okay, well, as soon as you're starting to learn a lot about people, yeah, let's say we're giving them 5 recommendations. Well, let's make sure one of them isn't what they normally watch. Let's start to broaden their viewing. Let them appreciate the value that they're getting for their subscription. Saying, hey, we know you like these, so you might like this. And that can get increasingly into premium content and paid-for content as you develop the trust with the user, with the subscriber. And that is a very important point. I agree with the other panel
That's great.
members.
Maybe you can eventually break my wife of the death and dismemberment show.
Well,
So
I mean, if that's what she
Don't have
likes,
to.
you know.
John?
So one of the approaches that we take is that we have the ability to set up individual user profiles in our system. And those profiles are informed both by explicit user inputs, like rating content, rating shows. Everybody's pretty familiar with that paradigm. The other way that we do that is through implicit user content and watching user behavior. So, Richard, I think you touched on that a little bit.
Sounds a lot like our slides.
So what we do is we educate, and we have these user profiles that are developed over time. One of the things, to your point about your wife and what happens in a typical situation, our system has the ability to actually blend multiple user profiles on the fly depending on who's in front of the device. So in other words, if I'm sitting there and my wife is sitting there and we have vastly different tastes, I can click on both of those avatars and I can essentially then enter the system, develop a brand new model on the fly, and then that model's informing the search and the recommendations algorithms and the personalization for the content that's being recommended. So that eliminates the the problem of my TiVo thinks I'm something I'm not. And it allows you to blend these multiple profiles, and you can change them. You can also add new profiles on the fly and begin through explicit user input, building a brand new profile if you've never been on the system before. And that, again, solves some of the pain points in the industry where folks have been on Netflix, been on some other services, where it can take you 24, 48 hours to really start developing a profile that's meaningful and getting some recommendations. So those are a couple of ways that we've addressed those issues.
Oh, and I've got a question for you. Listening to this dialogue here, I'm wondering, how do you take a family of multiple users using your product, which is an iOS-based review of what's on right now on television? How do you lead those individuals to actually consume the content that they're interested in?
So I'm going to be kind of controversial here because it's not a problem we're kind of tackling directly, because I think that situation, and another stat I heard yesterday, 75% of viewing is social, and by real world social it means that it's a compromised decision based on what you're watching. And what we're after is tackling more fundamental problems of what's on now, and that huge problem of trying to combine all different results and family and kids and kid shows and everything else. I think they're more fundamental problems we need to fix first.
And describe for the audience very quickly how your system works so they understand the relationship between an individual looking for content and how it's discovered in your system.
So we kind of start off by explicitly asking the user what they're interested in. So just tell us a few different things you like, and we build a real-time feed based on that. And the real-time is key because the goal for us is just to answer the question of what's on. So what we do is, based on that user, a customized feed of live television is thrown up on their iOS device, on their phone or their tablet, and always the question of what's on is answered based exactly on a kind of a relevance of what they've told us. So we kind of expand the relevance universe based on what they've told us initially.
So an example might be NBA Finals. I'm interested in the NBA Finals.
Yeah.
I can find it easily through your system?
It's hopefully a bit better than that. So one of the first questions you ask, well, what team do you follow, or what music do you like? So if you know what team you follow, we know who's on that team. We know if any of that team are being interviewed at any times, and we can start to expand based on that information. So we kind of build a relevant universe based on that one piece of information.
Let me pause for a moment and mention to the audience that I'd like to interject some questions from the audience. So if you'd prepare some thoughts in a moment after this next question, I'm going to turn to you and allow you to address the panelists. I'm sorry, Arieli?
Just listening to the opinions here, it's very clear that there's been a number of viewpoints illustrated. Alex mentioned that we can gather a lot from what's trending now and not necessarily specific personal information. Richard said that we can get more and more personal based on whether somebody uses their profile or not. Owen mentioned social. And contrary to the debate yesterday where everybody had, and sorry, Yossi mentioned various tastes and soulmates, soulmates. Contrary to the debate yesterday where everybody had to pick a side, at the end of the day, an operator has a very varied population. And it can't, one of the things that we've identified is that you cannot address that type of population with one method. You can't say, okay, I'm going to give non-personal because I don't want to demand an opt-in. Or you can't expect an opt-in from people who aren't used to communicating that way with their television. You can't expect people to look for their soulmates if they feel they found them and married them 15 years ago. So there's the people who have the best connection with the audience are the operators themselves. And we feel, and this is obviously brought about in our product, that the operator has to have the control to address the different variants in their population. Say, okay, I have customers who are ready to opt in and log in and identify themselves. Fine. Social may be one reason they do it.
We're not social, by the way. I just need to clarify. We're not
Yeah.
social TV.
No, sorry, I meant I was looking at Richard's. But social may be one reason to do it, but there may be others.
He's very antisocial, yes.
We can talk about it later if you want. The operator will know if it's a zip code, if it's a certain area, and by filling that out and by fine-tuning the recommendations, eventually you can improve the accuracy. again, accuracy equals credibility. Because just rolling out recommendations, that's fine for the first couple of months. But if the recommendations don't prove their consistency and relevance, people will start ignoring them. And there's probably a number of consultants in the room who can share with you their experiences about that.
Alex, add your thoughts, and then we'll go to the audience.
One small comment I'd like to make that you mentioned, operators need to do this. Operators need to do this. I think one of the things that's exciting about where we are now with television is that operators are being challenged a little bit more than they have been in past years because you know what, CE folks can do this too, and so if they're CE manufacturers who can put together a compelling experience on your box where they are getting you to connecting you to the content that you're interested in through the various ways, whether it's highlighting things that are trending, whether it's attempting a more personalized approach, or some whether it's highlighting things that are that are important according to appointment-based viewing, like Olympics, right? Or probably a hybrid of all of that. There's some exciting competition that's happening in a way that that really hasn't for a while now.
Yeah, I think every customer's needs are different, whether it's CE or whether it's an operator. And I think what you need to offer is a holistic set of solutions that's going to kind of grow with them and expand over time as their discovery needs become more sophisticated. And there isn't any one right answer. And if you look at two given customers side by side, they have completely different views of the world. And so I think that's really important. And I think the other thing is that we as vendors and providers, we can't pretend to be able to make their choices for them, on their business models, on their economics. Somebody may have a vastly different view about how they want to fine-tune a search engine or a recommendation engine depending on business rules and economic goals. Someone else might be a lot more of a purist about those types of things. I think our jobs here sort of collectively are to provide the tool sets that allow our customers to be able to do that and make those decisions and have flexibility.
I definitely want to come back to that in just a moment. Let me ask the audience, are there any questions you'd like to pose to the panelists at this time? By show of hands. You want to state your name, your business, and your succinct question.
Actually, can you say that again, please?
Thank you.
Dave Alloway, work at Cablevision, so MSO. One of the questions I have for you is, how much weight do you put on the search piece of it versus the recommendations? Is this a situation where we're solving a problem that isn't as bad as we think it is? It's a one and done type thing. With people consuming about 32 hours of TV a week, if they have 4 favorite shows, they can fill that up rather quickly with VOD, with DVR, with syndicated programs. So how much recommendation do they really need versus a easy search tool that might give them some other things like that at that one point of search and discovery, and then they're done for a while?
I think a bunch of us want to answer that. I have a mic. Owen mentioned earlier that 60% of the time viewers are coming to the television with the intent of watching something. So I think search is absolutely a huge component of viewing. One of the other things I was going to mention earlier, as far as this exciting time in discovering content, is really that these second screen devices, the companion apps, they're also enabling a whole different type of user experience. And so I think search is a lot more compelling when you can use a keyboard where you can be doing something while you've got a video up on the screen. So I think having good search engine is absolutely part of the critical part of the experience.
We use content discovery as an overarching term to cover a number of behaviors. One of the ways to discover content is direct search, and that's obviously a proactive method that is good for some people in certain or different parts of different audiences at different instances. Another type of behavior is just a passive receiving recommendations, and that's also something that many people appreciate. So these are just 2 types of discovery. There's actually a third, which is somewhere in the middle, where people have a sort of assisted search where they're given, they give an indication, we give them some options, they follow that path, we call it explore, but it's another method of semi-active discovery. Recommendations aren't intended to replace search or vice versa. They're all just complementary ways for people to enjoy the content that you're offering them.
Yeah, can I step in
When
here?
you say search, you know, it's always it's always an interesting
Good luck,
question.
Richard.
Search for what? If you don't know the name of the title, what do you search for? Because it was mentioned earlier that I think what is so special about entertainment that we need to consume, beside TV shows, let's say specifically around movies, we need fresh stuff. So what do I search for if I don't know the name of the title? Do I search by... So typically, search should go around the way you think about it. The way, in terms of the mood, I feel like watching something clever or witty in New York or something. But in order to achieve effective search, you have to have the underlying classification, the way the content was created. And if then it moves back to the next panel, you should be able to search like you think. And you could say something like, I'm sitting here with my wife, and we are most interested watching something together, maybe a romantic witty, but we had enough of Woody Allen. So then to take that expression and to convert it into ends and ors, we're all engineers, so we know that eventually machines understand expressions and ends and ors, and only when you have the underlying classification, such search can be effective.
I think
You know,
we've-
one quick
okay.
point, that is, you asked a question about search, and I'll ask the panelists a follow-up to that, which is, if I don't know exactly what I'm looking for, but it's not a mood-based issue, I'm looking for something where I remember a scene or I remember some kind of characterization of that film, how do I find it? An example might be Coke bottle, Africa.
I may
Can you
jump
find-
up and down to take this one, but
Go ahead.
no.
I'll let you take it, then back to my
So
question.
just back to the original question quickly, though. Safi, I do completely agree, though, with holistic approach to discovery, and I think you do have to think of it in those terms. The approach that we've taken is we've actually integrated our search and recommendations, meaning that if I search on my user profile, my results are going to be ordered differently based on my personal preferences than Gerard's results are going to be. So we've taken a pretty integrated approach to search and recommendations because we feel that drives the most personally relevant content. I think also to Yossi's point, there are a lot of ways to search, based on setting, on era, on mood, on theme, on subject, on all kinds of things, and that's something that our system can do as well. And then going back to this very granular search. Our DNA as a company, going back several years, was the creation of very deep, time-based, frame-level metadata, and so our search engine is capable of executing those types of searches. So I can say, show me something about Tom Cruise dancing. What was the movie where Clint Eastwood has the .44 Magnum? I can execute a search on that and not know the title and get a pretty relevant, good result.
Great.
Or a set of results.
Yeah,
Richard?
it's worth saying, I mean, the whole thing together, you've got to really look at, as the panelists have been saying, search and navigation aren't the same thing. Search and recommendations, they aren't the same thing, but the two things are really closely related, certainly in the mind of consumers. And I think we call this intelligent navigation. So it's a mixture of things you know you want, things you go and directly look for, and the metadata powers that, and there's a whole metadata understanding piece that we have that automatically extracts knowledge from the metadata, whether it's from Trivium or any other services that the operator has, and working on that, extracting real knowledge from that, which allows you to do the smart searches. To reorder your search, is it by using my preference profile, so making it ordered so it's going to be the things that I'm most likely to want to see will be the things at the top of the list, or just do a general relevance search and matching the keywords in the same way as a general search engine would do. And that's fine. You need to satisfy that experience. If I'm looking for something, I need to find it. So within my subscription, whether it's on a companion device like an iPad or the web, or whether it's on the set-top box, it all needs to be able to satisfy this. And that needs to then drive the sort of the lean forwards experience, which means that when you come and you're actually sitting there with a glass of beer and something to eat, and you're sitting there saying, just show me something. Well, it needs to be able to satisfy that use case as well, that example as well. So for me, that's the experience I have when I'm sitting in my living room is, yeah, just show me something good. Whereas if I'm sitting at my PC, it's, yeah, let me go and find something. And a good search and recommendations engine needs to be able to support all of those use cases in the different areas. And I think a good place to look to see an example of that, where it's being done really, really well, is at Liberty Global, at their UPC territories first of all in Holland and Switzerland. So where they're changing the whole view of the set-top box from being one of grid-driven to one of personalization-driven. So the first user experience is, hey, what about these things? Okay, don't like them, go and search. If you don't like them, find the grid. But the first experience is, we've got these things we think you might enjoy. And that extends through the Horizon project and then the Orion project, which is the web and a second device extension of that. And I think that's where TV is going sort of down the line, is a very much a personalized service driven by all of the good things that the panelists were talking about, but a personalized service with search and recommendations at the very front of what it does.
Do we have any additional questions?
Before,
Sorry, Alex.
we keep talking about personalization, but I think there's a lot of really compelling interfaces that can be driven just by very well-organized data. Like, imagine a view of all your linear and on-demand options that highlights blockbuster new releases. I mean, you can get that from the box office, movie theater stuff, right? But if you want to see your movie options on the TV, typically you have to go, see what's on HBO, see what's on Netflix, and take this very siloed approach. But if you can kind of surface things at a more universal level and just be content-driven, I think there's a lot of just kind of fundamental interfaces that we can get to before, again, we get into, that's an important component as much as a taste profile might be.
Do we have any additional questions from the audience? Gentleman way in the back there.
Hi, I'm Frank Bender with Motorola Mobility, and some of you are talking about finding out what's on right now, and others are going back into a VOD catalog and finding out what's stored. What I'm surprising is I don't hear anything that takes advantage of the DVR. So I'm a DirecTV subscriber, and last year I recorded the Tour de France series. Well, now it thinks I'm interested in everything cycling, right? So it is recommending, and it's not only just recommending, but it's actually storing on my DVR anything that comes through that has to do with cycling. So it's kind of a push recommendation into the DVR, which I actually find quite useful.
Straightforward to do, very straightforward to do.
So your question is, what about DVR for recommendations?
Take advantage of that fact that you've got this big storage device that you can push recommendations to.
Can I go first with this one? I'm sure everybody else has got a good opinion as well. But yeah, the pull and the push is absolutely what a recommendation engine needs to do. So I'm sitting here right now showing me something from the various catalogs that I want to see. But then there's also overnight, the DVR is going to be doing nothing, looking up ahead. Let's get it to record stuff. If it's doing nothing else, let's set it up to do that. And we've got deployments in the field which are actively doing that. And of course, learning from the fact that you're doing that. And making recommendations to you, something I've not mentioned so far, that include things that are stored on your DVR as well as things that are elsewhere on the network, either in live TV or on the on-demand catalogs.
Yeah, I think that the fact that DVR wasn't mentioned, it was an omission just based on the examples that have been tossed out. Obviously, the DVR, the catch-up TV, the VOD catalogs of the various types, and the linear, they're all part of the content the offering of a service provider, and therefore they're game for content discovery and need to be included in the same way.
But the most likely evolution of the DVR is going to be something in the cloud, right? I mean, it's not going to be limited by a physical box in your home. And ultimately, I think that's just going to be a signal. The fact that you're saying, hey, I like Tour de France enough to want to view this at some point in the future, that's just going to be a signal that any of the recommendation engine can then, take into account. Oh, I like high-profile competitive sports events, or oh, I like cycling, and then hopefully turn out something meaningful to you. But I don't know that the DVR needs to be thought of as a separate category anymore.
I think the whole user experience, it's a pretty touchy issue. It's always been blamed on engineers, and I'm an engineer myself, that we do a bad job designing user experience, and I think this is quite true. And for that, you really need professional designers. And yesterday, there was a lot of debate about how the designers should do a better job. I'm even now challenging the designers, because often what happens that designers design a user experience ignoring completely the discovery, and only when they finish they say, we forgot about it. Now they try to squeeze in a button or some screens. So I think overall, when operators, that's maybe one of the most important lessons that we have working with customers. If they bring the discovery engine up front and the designers are aware of the features, then it is pervasive. It's completely integral. So there is no button called recommendation. The whole guide should be recommendation. Why do we have a guide? Something to show what's good for me. So the whole notion of recommendation, to me, it's outdated. Guide is actually a reflection of what's good for me, and the engine should power that particular guide.
Yeah, I don't disagree with anything that was just said up here about the platforms. I think specifically on DVRs, some of the more interesting work that we've done lately has been monitoring the interaction with DVR on the set-top, and what that user behavior has been, and then doing implicit models on the personal profiles based on that. And it's really exciting. We're able to predict the behavior of users within about a 95% accuracy on a lot of the work that we've done recently, just on what they've done on their DVR and what they're going to do in the future. So I think that's really interesting. I think how people interact with their DVRs is critical. Do you record something all the time but never watch it? Is that a legitimate input? Or are there better inputs that you watch it religiously all the time? So we've really kind of mined that data. We've done some really interesting work in that area, and I agree with you. I think the DVR is a real important piece on looking at implicit user behavior.
Panelists, we're wrapping up here, and I'm going to ask you to give me one sentence, please, very brief. What do you think is the next big breakthrough in this world of recommendations, guides, and the use of metadata and analytics to create a connection to the consumer? Owen, let's start with you.
I think the interface. I think we're going to see some huge breakthroughs in the interface. It's the obvious one.
I can almost do it in a single word. I think personalization, personalizing the service that the operator gives to the customer through recommendations.
Thank you, Richard.
I'd say data-driven search and discovery, so focusing on the content as much as anything.
Thank you, Alex.
I'd actually say that the next step is for service providers to actually roll out discovery in a massive way, and for subscribers to get the opportunity to experience it properly. There have been smatterings of rollouts, but they're not pure. From a purist perspective, it's not true recommendations in a large extent.
Okay, thank you, Ariella.
I think generally technologies that lower the friction of entering any of our systems and our technologies that we offer. So, features like voice command, to power search and not have to sit there with a keyboard. Things like ACR to, bring up in a very frictionless way related content. I think that'll make everything we're talking about here a lot more seamless and just kind of easy to use in the future.
Thanks, John.
I think Siri educated us and showed the hunger for something of driving us naturally. So I would say search like you speak and think.
Thanks very much, Yossi. So, folks, thanks very much for joining this wayfinding presentation. In your wayfinding out of here, there's a break now downstairs. Look forward to talking to all of you. Thanks again.